Okay, so the next like 3 sections, we've already talked about factoring, and that's how you can that's one way that you can solve a quadratic. This is the second way, solving by square roots. And then we're going to learn 2 more, completing the square quadratic formula. And that's like kind of how the chapter ends. And so we'll eventually, in all of it, we'll have 4 different ways that we can solve a quadratic algebraically. But there are certain ways to look at a problem or look at an equation and decide which way should I solve. And so the 2 ways that you can determine or that you can know that I should solve by square roots is if you have, so in these examples, I only have 2 terms. So if I have no middle term, then I should solve by square roots. So if I have no middle term at all, like I don't have just an x, then I can solve by square roots, and it makes life really simple. And solving by square roots is the easiest way that you can solve because you're just solving for x. And so for these, you should get x equals plus or minus 3, x equals plus or minus 2 root 3, x equals plus or minus 4, x equals plus or minus 6. And the reason why I put a plus or minus, because a quadratic always has 2 solutions. And if you were to find the square root of 9, it would work if you had a positive 3 or a negative 3. When you square negative 3, you also get a positive 9. So the second way that I can know I should solve by square roots is if my equation is in vertex form. So you'll notice 9, 10, 11, and 12, these are all in vertex form, which means I have like the little parentheses, then I have the squared, I have an a value in front, sometimes I don't. So a big indicator of solving by square roots is in vertex form. How to solve these is by doing PEMDAS backwards. So I'm going to add subtract first in number 9, but there's nothing to add subtract. So then I'm going to multiply divide. And so I want to get rid of this 1/9. So how can I get rid of that? I can do 2 things. I can multiply by 9, or I could divide by 1/9. In my head, it makes more sense to multiply each side by 9. So I'm left with x plus 3 squared equals 36. The next part of PEMDAS backwards is exponent. So that means I'm going to take the square root of each side. These 2 will cancel. And I'm left with x plus 3 equals, my square root of 36 is plus or minus 6. And then the stuff, so this is technically in parentheses. So parentheses is my last step in PEMDAS backwards. So I'm going to subtract 3 on each side. So what this looks like is x equals negative 3 plus or minus 6. Now, if you have nice numbers, like all integers, then I want you to actually solve it out and give me 2 real numbers. If you have square roots and stuff, like I'm going to show you in the next example, then I want you to just leave it like that. But with this, you could actually solve it out. So negative 3 minus 6 is negative 9. Negative 3 plus 6 is 3. So I'm going to have 2 real numbers. Most of the time when you're solving by square roots, your answer will have a square root in it. So I'm going to show you the next example. But if you have 2 integers, then you can actually work it out. Like I can do negative 9 plus 3. I can do negative 3 plus 6, negative 3 minus 6. So number 10, PEMDAS backwards. There's nothing to add or subtract. So I'm going to divide. What do I need to divide by? Divide each side by 4. X minus 2 squared equals 10. I square root. So x minus 2 equals, can I simplify the square root of 10? No, so I'm going to leave it as plus or minus square root of 10. Then I do the stuff in parentheses last, so I add 2 on each side. So x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 10. And this is how I want you to leave your answer. So whatever you add or subtract from the parentheses in the end, I want that to go first. Then I want you to have your plus or minus. Then I want you to have the stuff that's under the radical. So try number 11 and 12. Okay, for number 11, you multiply each side by 3 first. Then you take the square root of each side. You cannot simplify the square root of 33. But remember that you do put the plus or minus in front. And I add 4 to each side, so my final answer is 4 plus or minus square root of 33. For number 12, PEMDAS backwards, I need to subtract the 8 first to the other side. And so that leaves me with 24. Square root of 24 simplifies to 2 root 6 because there's a perfect square of 4 inside. Then you add 4 to each side, 4 plus or minus 2 root 6. So what are the, just in recap, what are the 2 ways that you can look at an equation and know to solve by square roots?
Oh, if there's 2 terms and if it's in vertex.
So if you have 2 terms, and by 2 terms I mean like an x squared and a number. So there's like no x term. And then also vertex form.